This is part of the series of trying to help people with faith crisis, particularly to the Book of Mormon, but in general the broader Christian community. Now, one thing I've noticed that the Book of Mormon has had a renaissance, not just amongst LDS, but really amongst people outside the LDS, specifically Pentecostals and Baptists. Many more people I encounter now are interested in the Book of Mormon. They want to know about it. They've heard all the problems with it, and there's the contradictions. Tonight, let's talk about a contradiction I'm going to try to clear up for people. Now, on the one hand, the most older LDS people will talk about how the Book of Mormon was translated by the gift and power of God by Joseph Smith after he was given the plates and the breastplate and the unum and thurnum, which were devices like glasses or stones or crystals that he was given that were used to translate the golden plates of Mormon. Plates of Mormon probably were descended from Joseph of Egypt, who was in the Bible, Joseph the coat of many colors. So it's probably a long line of people maintaining, these plates from the time of Joseph. That is what the narrative, the text itself says. Let's focus on that for the moment. We're not going to focus on whether this is true or not. We're going to focus on what the text tells us, because people are getting mixed messages and they don't understand what people are extrapolating into the text things that aren't there, and they're ignoring things that are there. That's confusing everyone. So most older people say, but the Joseph Smith translated these ancient Hebrew plates. These were plates that were brought out of Jerusalem prior to the destruction by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, when he destroyed the first temple of King Solomon and destroyed Jerusalem and carried the Jews into captivity for 70 years. Levi, Sariah, his wife, Nephi, Sam, Laman, and Lamuel all escaped and eventually found their way by building a ship to the New World, and they took these plates with them. And over a course of about a millennium, these plates were added to. That is what the Book of Mormon narrative states it is. Again, we're not going to argue the point whether Nephites really existed or not right tonight, but we are going to argue what the text says versus things that are being extrapolated into it. So Joseph Smith is given the plates by Moroni, who was in the Book of Mormon. He lived, he was resurrected, sent back to earth. He told Joseph Smith where to find these records, and he dug these records up. And with these golden plates were this artifice called the unum and thurnum, was attached to a breastplate. Joseph Smith probably removed the unum and thurnum from the breastplate because this was like a fixed chest plate you'd wear, and these crystals would be here in a fixed position, and he would have to stare through the crystals to translate these plates because they were not written in English. They were written in an ancient form of Hebrew that was used when the Hebrews were in Egypt. So this Paleo-Egyptian Hebrew was the language he was translating through the unum and thurnum. I know it's complicated, but stick with me. So that's what an older person will be told what was happening. All right, so they'll say that these crystals, these stones, these were used to view what was going on. But recently, people have called what's called the stone in the hat. So people have uncovered, specifically in the book Rough Stone, Bushman's book, Rough Stone Rolling, they have said that Joseph Smith put a stone in a hat. He put his face in the hat, and he translated that way, or he was given the message through these stones. And therefore the plates were covered up on the table. He didn't use the unum and thurnum. He used this seer stone, this occult object, like a crystal ball. And from that crystal ball, or this seer stone, or this object that he had in a hat with his face in it, he was translating the Book of Mormon. Now, Don Bradley, in his excellent work that I've talked about many times, The Lost 116 Pages, Don Bradley talks about how that beaver hat is very similar to what the Hebrews had to do. You cannot look at the glory of the Lord. You had to put your face and cover your face. And the beaver hat was what you would cover. You could only cover the objects of the Lord with animal skin. You couldn't cover it with just wood or paper or anything like that. It had to be animal skin to cover the ark. So specifically, I have a cat attacking me here. So you'll see pictures since Bushman's time that people will look at Joseph Smith looking into a hat and people sitting around him and scribes writing it down. And this has thrown a lot of people's faith off, because to them this is like an occult practice, a magical practice. He's conducting some type of occult seance with these stones to translate the Book of Mormon. And this is exactly the attack that was used in 1834 by the book Mormonism Unveiled. Because it was said that Joseph stood behind a curtain, and therefore you didn't know what he was doing. Was he reading the Spalding manuscript? Did he had some notes? What was he doing? We don't know. So there's always been this attack. So there's been this tension between Joseph Smith's story of the Unum and Thurnum and the excuse me, some water here, and the seer stone. So there's these two dichotomies that are, I think, causing a lot of faith crisis. I think I can clear it up. If you read the Book of Mormon intro, it kind of tells you what happens. So let's go into the opening of the Book of Mormon. We're in the testimony of Joseph Smith. And so now Moroni, this resurrected being, is talking to Joseph Smith, and he says, quote, "He said there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the source from which they sprang. He also said that the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it, as delivered by the Savior, that is Christ, to the ancient inhabitants." Next paragraph. "Also, that there were 2 stones in silver bows, and those stones fastened to a breastplate constituted what's called the Urim and Thummim, deposited with the plates, and the possession of and use of these stones were what constituted seers in ancient or former times, and that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book." So I think that explains, and this is just my opinion, that explains what happens, why we have this 2 narrative that people can't seem to reconcile. On the one hand, Joseph is using the Unum and Thurnum crystals with the breastplate like glasses, and he's trying to translate this. In the other narrative, we see Joseph Smith has a stone in a hat with his face in it, translating or receiving. And the argument usually is that the stone in the hat, he's not translating, he's transmitting. He just sees something and he just says what he sees. Now, again, I think that's a little bit, and that's the 2 camps. In the one camp, he's using the Unum and Thurnum, and it's somehow by the gift and power of God, it's translating and giving him the English equivalent of what he sees on those plates. I don't think that's any different than what's in the hat. But here's the point. What stone is in the hat? Now, there's a lot of discussion on this, but it says right here, there were 2 stones in silver bows, and these stones fastened to the breastplate. It's very, in my opinion, it's simple. He took the Unum and Thurnum off, and he put them in a hat, and he put his face in the hat, and that's how he was able to translate it. Remember, and I've read this before, there was a warning given by Moroni. He said, let's read the warning. This is very important. "Again, he told me that when I got those plates of which he had spoken for the time that they should be attained was not yet fulfilled, I should not show them to any person, neither the breastplate with the Urim and Thummim, only to those whom I should be commanded to show them. If I did, I should be destroyed." So Moroni has warned him that if he shows these plates, or the breastplate, or the Urim and Thummim, he will be destroyed. And probably by inference, not only would he be destroyed, other people could be destroyed as well. And there's plenty of evidence in the biblical with the Ark of the Covenant that anyone who interferes with the Ark of the Covenant could be destroyed. If you touched it, with profane hands, it could kill you. It was a very, very dangerous object. Think Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it would make sense if he was going to translate in front of people, he could not let them see it. So he would put them in a hat. He'd put his face in a hat, and that way all the light would be blocked out. He could see it. But more importantly, he was not breaking the commandment he was given by Moroni, the angel. You're not allowed to show these to anyone. No one can see these. Only the ones that we command you to. I think that can clear up the problem by just simply that that would seem that from a technical standpoint, Joseph would just remove them from the breastplate because it probably didn't fit him, and he would just use the stones like with his holding it up to his eye, trying to translate this way, and or he could put it in a hat. He realized, like, hey, I could put it in a hat, I could translate it. Now you say, well, he wasn't looking through the stones at the plates. That, I don't think that should be a real problem, because we're dealing with some type of power of God. You know, if the stone is in proximity, think Wi-Fi. If the stone is in proximity of the plates, they still work. You know, so you have to think a little differently about this. If the stone, like a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth signal, if it's close enough proximity, they're going to translate. It doesn't have to be pointed directly. It has to be in proximity of the plates. Remember, even the stone in the hat people always show the plates are there covered, because again, the commandment is, I cannot show this to anything, but I have to be in proximity. The stones aren't like 100 miles away or upstairs. They had to be in close proximity to those seer stones, the unum and thummim, for them to work. I think this is what happens, and this is where the story gets split and people get confused over, you know, the seer stone. The seer stone, basically the seer stone people think they don't, what I see is it's the unum and or thummim. It's the seer stones given to, that were with the plates when you discover them. It's by the gift and power of God. It's not just some random seer stone or some occult object or crystal ball he brought in. He's actually using the unum and thummim. I don't think everyone figured that out. That's the stone he has in the hat, and he covers it because, you know, if you look how the Hebrews would approach the Ark of the Covenant, they had to veil themselves. You could not show it. You see the commandment in the Book of Mormon is, if you look at these stones, you'll be destroyed. And by extension, if I'm going to destroy you, I might destroy everyone around you, because this is a commandment of God. You must obey it. There can be no questioning this. I would say the seer stone in the hat is an unum or thummim. Now, I know people claim that the stones they have are that the stone that Joseph gave Oliver that eventually got to Whitmer, that was a seer stone. I don't know the chain of custody there. So, but I would say it seems rational that when the Book of Mormon says in the testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith, also there were 2 stones in silver bows, and these stones fastened to a breastplate constitute what is called the Urim and Thummim. Deposited with the plates and the possession of and use of these stones were what constituted seers in ancient or former times, and that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book. Now notice some other words here. The possession and use of. So you had to possess them. You had to be given custody of these for them to work. You just couldn't hand it to anyone random like me or someone else and they would necessarily work. They were possession use. You know, and God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book. So again, it's almost like there's a passcode on it. It's not going to just like a password in your computer. It's not just going to work with any random person. You had to be the person those stones were matched to for them to work. And on top of that, they had to be in proximity. Either you could be looking at them directly, or they had to be off-centered, but they had to be close to those plates for this to work. This is how these systems were interconnected. So from a systems point of view, this is, I think, happens. And this will stop the confusion people have over this 2 theory that everyone's hung up on. I think as long as the unum and thummim, that was the seer stones in the hat, or he could use them directly to the plates. So in other words, if he was in public, he couldn't use them the standard way where he could do the stones directly looking at plates, because he was commanded he could not do that. He could not do that. But when he's in public and people are clamoring, because people are betting their livelihood, they're betting their lives on this whole thing that Joseph Smith's talking about, the Book of Mormon. And people were giving up everything. So they had, as all humans, they had to say, I need to see some kind of proof. So Joseph, the only way he could do it and not break the commandment to show this, which could endanger him and everyone else, he had to put the seer stones in the hat, keep the plates covered in proximity, think Bluetooth, think Wi-Fi, in close proximity. Then he could look and he could translate that way because they're interconnected. I mean, we could do that today through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I hope that helps. That's just my theorizing on how the stones and how these 2 theories are really one theory. They're not 2. They're not contending ideas. They're really, I'm trying to synthesize the ideas as one. So I hope that helps. Take care. We'll see you in the next video.